Now, here are your hosts, Captain Ed Mehmet and Detective Kevin Schroeder.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Cop Talk. I'm Kevin Schroeder, your host. I'm here with my co-host, the great Captain.
Hello, WABC listeners and YouTube viewers. Here we are again with a good friend who we've had on before, and I'm sure he has a lot to say about what's going on in this country.
So before we start the show, I'd just like to give our thoughts and prayers to the family of Charlie Kirk. What a tragedy, what a shame, what a disgrace, the murder of Charlie Kirk, the assassination. But our thoughts and prayers from Cop Talk go out to his family. Today's guest, we have the great, very famous Supreme Court Judge, Richard Weinberg, who is also a member of the WABC family. He has a show called Let the Record Show on weekends on WABC, and also with Katz and Cosby every night, Monday through Friday, 5 to 6 p.m. on WABC Radio. Judge, welcome.
It's nice to be back with two of my closest friends. Always a privilege, always a pleasure.
And we also have with us, fortunate enough to have him back by popular demand, retired NYPD Sergeant Pete Panucci. Pete, welcome.
Glad to be here.
Great. So, Judge, how you been? You good?
Now that I see you two gentlemen and the sergeant here, I'm delighted and feel better already.
That's good. So I'll tell you what, let's go right to the Charlie Kirk murder, assassination. Your thoughts?
My thoughts are we're living in very dangerous times. We're a nation divided. I don't see a quick and easy healing. I think ideology has taken over the minds and the souls of large segments of this country. There's a book written years ago by a professor at Columbia named Daniel Bell. It's called The End of Ideology. That was wishful thinking. We're more ideological today, more partisan today, more divided than ever before. And what we've done is we've lost our moral compass. Now, everybody is saying this is a problem for both the left and the right. And I respectfully submit that the vast majority of the political violence, the violent political rhetoric, which leads to political violence, the indoctrination has come from the left. And I say that as a so-called common sense Democrat, because I've always been a Democrat, I continue to be a Democrat. But as Ronald Reagan said, the Democratic Party left me, I didn't leave the party. I'm still in the party because I'm hopeful someday they'll come back to a common sense center.
Right.
I'm deeply concerned about the future of this country. I certainly hope this doesn't become a situation where crazies on the right decide to retaliate for the assassination of Kirk. If that happens, you can have a disintegration of society. We don't need people shooting each other in the interest of a political agenda. We should have discussion, we should have debate, we should have fair elections, and then we should move on from there. Stop calling people fascists, stop calling them dictators, stop saying you're trying to save democracy. These are all talking points which inflame people, many of whom are psychologically unbalanced, and others who have an ideological agenda to destroy this great country.
Very well said. Sergeant?
I have to be honest with you. Last week, around a long time, a lot of homicides under my belt, a lot of really brutal incidents. And maybe I'm getting old. I don't know. It started off when I saw that young woman stabbed on the train down in Charlotte, and the look of terror on her face, she didn't even know it. She was already dying. I says, wow. I says, that is absolutely horrendous. Jump ahead a few days. I was coming out of the shower, and my wife...
Together?
My wife came in, and she was very quiet, and she said, Charlie Kirk was just shot. And I'm like, what? And I went out, and I saw the video. You can't unsee it. Absolutely revolting. And I've been pretty upset ever since. A large part, some of the stuff that's being fired back, it's horrendous. And then I saw a picture of him and his kids, and I thought I got tears in my eyes.
Yeah.
He was the one guy who wanted to debate. Right. He wanted to talk. He wanted to engage. We live in troubling times, and like the judge said, I worry about it. I worry about a trigger incident.
Yeah.
a flashpoint, either retaliation or another attack by the left.
Judge, all these universities claim, we're all for freedom of speech, right? Like these demonstrations a year ago. Now, none of these universities, most of them anyway, have not come out with statements or against this type of violence and against freedom of speech on the campuses. On these universities,
I think the universities have disgraced themselves. You do not have a First Amendment right to suppress other people's right to go to college, to attend classes, to go to the library and to study, to listen to competing points of view from guest speakers on the campus. The college campuses didn't stand up to the times. You had a radical fringe, some of which were paid conspirators. People funding them are paid conspirators. They want to do havoc and violence to this country. The college administrators did not stand up. The cops, as you and the sergeant understand, and that Captain Mamet understands, they have to be invited onto the campuses. They're not invited onto the campuses, or they wait too long. The cops can't come in on their own volition. When we talk about dangerous times, you have to say, where does it all begin? It begins in the educational system, where there's been indoctrination, diversity, equity, inclusion, critical race theory, other ideological agendas to shape the minds and the hearts of the young people. And the young people don't know any better. And if they don't know any better, who's going to carry on this great country? We're less than a year away from July 4th of 2026, the 250th anniversary of this great country. Never take it for granted that a country will survive and flourish. All great empires, all great countries die from the inside first. And the ultimate problem is when your enemies on the outside see you dying from the inside, that's when they move in.
Wasn't that the case of Rome?
Absolutely. If you read the great book, The Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire, that's exactly right. So the problem is that we have to get our heads straight in the educational system. Educational system means to be educated, not to be indoctrinated. And the universities have to do the right thing. They have to enforce real freedom of speech. You do not have, and as all you gentlemen who served the city of New York and this country honorably and well in law enforcement know, there is not a right to blockade tunnels and bridges, mass transit, Grand Central Station, Penn Station. That's all nonsense. There's no First Amendment right to impede the civil rights of other people going to and fro. And if the state government and the local prosecutors won't do their job and enforcing this, then it's up to the federal government to do that, because this is an infringement of federal civil rights law, which is in fact a crime. And I just came from a lunch with Jay Clayton, who was a guest speaker at the Police Athletic League lunch. And Jay is someone I know. And he understands the awesome responsibility of the federal government to assist us in protecting civilization. And that's what we're talking about. Because the net is, if we don't get this under control, you're going to have anarchy, you're going to have chaos, you're going to have more violence. And how do you come back from this?
Right. True. Very true.
We could have a civil war.
Well, Ed, it's funny you say that, and I don't mean that funny, but that's been my theme for a long time. We're on the cusp of a civil war. This is a nation divided, and we need to get back to common sense. We need to take a real hard look, by the way, who's funding these demonstrations, who's behind it. Every time you had demonstrations in 2020, in the summer of 2020, with the BLM characters and the Antifa characters, they all came out. They had their signs that were printed. They had their T-shirts that were pre-printed. They had their slogans, which were being mouthed by rote. They show up at a demonstration site. It's like a job. They get paid, and then they leave. So you have a whole bunch of paid agitators. You have people domestically, like the Soroses and his character from who's American, lives in China, who funds this. Right?
Neville Roy Singham.
Right. These are serious people. They have to be investigated. If necessary, they have to be prosecuted, because in my humble opinion, they are aiding and abetting a threat to this country. And it's serious business, and it has to be dealt with.
Judge, let's touch on the New York City maze race that's going on right now. How is Mandami have such a lead?
Well, interesting question. Goes back to the educational system. You have a whole generation of young people who have no idea what socialism is, who have no idea when they say from the river to the sea, or they support Antifa, what that means. So from the river to the sea means the abolition of the state of Israel. It means the Holocaust against, a genocide against the Jewish people in their country. That's what Intifada means. It means violent protest. It means everybody's fair game. Mandami's father has written articles and speechified about what an honor and wonderful thing it is to wear a suicide vest. That's going to be the mayor of the city of New York, a father. Does he repudiate these people? No. Antifa was a dangerous threat. BLM was a dangerous threat. These people today are even more of a dangerous threat. These are Islamists who are dedicated to the perpetration of a political, religious, cultural ideology. This is not live and let live, and they want to dominate a sphere of their own world. They're moving into Europe, all across the country, in the United States. They're a real serious threat. This kid, Mandami, who never had a real job his entire life, he's a child of privilege. His mother's a very wealthy woman who's a film producer. He's never had a real job, never put in a real day's work. Mouths a slogan. He's a pretty boy, so he looks good on camera. He's articulate. That's swell. But look at the history of socialism. Every place it's ever been, it's failed. Every place it's ever been, people lost freedom, opportunity, liberty. And every place it's ever been, to keep control of the power system, they're enforced it by guns and secret police. So what you have is you have a real problem. So let's go to something that all three of you know, and I'm very concerned about. One of the great threats to the great city of New York is the threat of a terrorist attack. And most of the terrorist attacks come from the Islamists. And there are ongoing relationships because of Ray Kelly, our former great police commissioner, working with foreign intelligence services, U.S. federal services, working together, hand in glove. NYPD had a unit dedicated to gathering intelligence and protecting us. And we have a real problem. Because I do not trust Mandami to work well with the feds or with ICE, because he's against ICE. He thinks they're bad. He said despicable things about NYPD, some of the bravest and most wonderful men and women I've ever known. He doesn't believe in incarceration. He believes in decarceration, which means let them all out. And there's some people, as we all know, that should be kept in jail. They're a threat to their fellow human beings. So are you really going to trust him to protect when the bridges are taken over or there are riots on the campuses to protect us? I don't. And undercover operations, you really expect him to support undercover operations? I don't. And the last thing I'll say on this topic is, do you really expect him to appoint people like I was and many of my good colleagues on the criminal court and the state Supreme Court, being public safety, law and order judges, worrying about the public? I don't.
There you go.
My question is, and I brought this up before, who would be the police commissioner under a guy like him?
Nobody good.
Right, you'd have to
Nobody
be,
good.
There may
you'd
not
have to
be
be
a
a
police
prostitute.
Nobody good. By the way, you raise a very interesting thing. Just the other day, this character Mandami said that if Benjamin Netanyahu, the duly elected prime minister of a democracy, perhaps America's greatest ally, comes to the United States, he's going to have him arrested. So let me tell you the problems with that. Number one, he's going to do this under an international criminal court warrant. We have no role in that international court. We're not a signer to that. We're not a signatory to that. We don't abide by what they say. They have no jurisdiction over us. That's number one. Number two, Netanyahu has a diplomatic immunity. You can't make an arrest. Number three, he's over the top when he says local cops can make an arrest of a foreign official. So what happens when they make the move and the security around Netanyahu says, no, you get your hands off of him? What happens then? And what are the cops going to do? Now, if you have a police commissioner who's worth his or her salt, he'll say to the mayor, you try to pull that stunt, I'm going to resign and say to the world exactly why, which is the honorable thing to do if you have a moral compass. If you get a weak-kneed, ambitious person who doesn't have a moral compass or professional integrity, what do? They'll try to enforce that order. I don't trust anybody Mandami puts in a position of responsibility and power.
Well, you know, that raises an issue that I've discussed many times. When Kevin, Pete, and I were sworn in, we took an oath. We took an oath to enforce all laws and ordinances. And I would think that we could defy stupid orders or illegal orders just because we took that oath. But everybody seems to think it doesn't matter. You know, like when de Blasio was doing his thing, they told the cops to stand down.
Well, because Jenkins did the same thing. In the riots in Brooklyn, he told everybody to stand down when they had the riots.
Yeah, but how can you stand down when you see crimes and you have an oath to enforce the law?
I agree with you. You know, the great lesson of the Nuremberg trials was that there's an obligation to a higher authority, and the higher authority is to do the right moral thing. That's the lesson of Nuremberg. You can't say I was just following orders.
Right.
A lot of people got hung because they were just following orders, or they claimed they were just following orders.
Right. So the police are in a difficult position. If you have a moral compass, you're going to say, no, I can't do that because it's an illegal order.
Well, that's exactly
what happens?
right.
You get fired?
The police, listen, where it has to stop, is where the police commissioner says, absolutely not. Now, I know, because Judge George Grasso is a good friend of mine from my days back at City Hall before I was on the bench. George was Deputy Commissioner
for Legal Matters.
For Legal Affairs. Okay. Later on, he became a first deputy,
right?
But then became a judge. George and I are very close friends, know each other for decades. And George would always tell Giuliani, who was a decent guy and a law and order guy, would say to him, no, you can't do this. Somebody has to have the brains and the courage to say to the principal, no, you can't do this. My operating principle, every time I've been the consigliere to a position, to a person of power, principle of power, whether it's the Speaker of the City Council or to my current position, is you have to tell people what they need to hear, not what they want to hear. That's your obligation to them and to the larger public interest. So you just say no. See, what I predict is you'll have a division in the police department amongst the service itself, not the political appointees. I think you're going to have cops resigning early, leaving before their pensions, going to places that pay them better, go to a place where you don't have a city council and a state legislature, mayors and governors who don't support law enforcement. And I think that puts the city at a great threat because you're losing seasoned people in NYPD who know the job and have the experience. You can replace the strategic response team with a bunch of social workers. What are they going to do the first time a social worker gets himself or herself cut up or killed? What's going to happen then?
They're going to call the police. If the police will respond, then.
Within the we're in a perpetual protest cycle, and it is being funded by
outside
bad entities overseas, and I spend a lot of time at these protests. The holy grail is to get rid of the SRG. It really is. And the abuse that these cops are putting up with, but they show tremendous restraint. I would say back in our day, we might not have been so understanding. I don't want some knucklehead, insane college kid an inch from my face doing this to me, spitting at me. And I won't go into the obscenities, but we're paid to listen to that. But hey, and for years we did it quite successfully. You know, you can stand there and yell till your throat falls out, but there's a limit. And I'm surprised that there hasn't been a bad incident yet. The last barrier with these protest groups, which are not going away anytime soon, is the SRG. And then we will have some of these things have gotten quite violent lately. The Antifa BLM elements from a few years ago have coalesced into these movements. I call them black bloc because they're just, everybody's dressed in black, masked up, always looking for trouble. They will sucker punch you in a heartbeat. And where it used to be, you'd see small groups of them. I'm seeing groups of over 100, 200 starting to show up at the different protests now. You take the SRG out of the equation, it's going to get ugly fast. They will be on steroids.
Well, in my time, and maybe in yours, we had the Tactical Patrol Force. which was created in 1960 or 61. And they responded to these major incidents. And they didn't take any bullshit. I mean, they really
Yes, they were quite understanding fellows, from what I heard.
PPF.
But-
You had to be 6 foot or higher, and then.
Even going back to the, I'm sorry, go
But
ahead.
the nonsense stopped immediately.
Oh yeah.
Once they were confronted, because these groups will use force. But once they are confronted physically, I find most of them are just like, if you do step to them, they're like, all right, anybody can be a tough guy running around with a mask and, throwing stuff until somebody gets in your face. That's a serious player. And police officers, it really irks me as of late. Maybe I'm spending too much time at these things.
Pete and Judge, you remember, and Captain, you remember early 90s, the Tompkins Square riots, right? Tompkins Square Park riots, right? Right by your neighborhood, actually.
Yes.
I was an
heard the
anti-crime,
helicopter.
Midtown North anti-crime. What they used to do with the crime guys is they'd put us in the crowd. We'd be in the crowd, and someone would throw a bottle at a police officer, right? And we wouldn't do nothing at that time. We'd follow him. It may be an hour later or 4 hours later. At some point, he's going to break off, or she's going to break off and go to the subway 3 blocks away. And then that's when we'd grab him or her. And it was a different ballgame because now you're not, it's outside the crowd. I don't see that anymore. I don't see there is no anti-crime anyway because now they wear uniforms. We were wearing plain clothes, anti-crime. That was what it was all about. You were in plain clothes on the cover, fit into the crowd, whether it be Midtown Manhattan or Tompkins Square Park. And you would identify the perp, follow him. Again, it could be an hour later, grab him, cuff him up, and that's it. Round ball.
Here's the problem. We no longer have those anti-crime teams anymore.
Well, that's what I said.
They're gone.
We don't. Right, exactly.
Most
which is a
effective
shame.
anti-crime program was the anti-crime
Right.
team.
What's the new name for it now? The anti-crime? It's called public
Safety units. Or
Yeah,
something.
Yeah.
They're wearing a windbreaker. It says police on it.
Yeah, and khaki pants. All right.
Whatever. Anyway, but
There's another issue, too, which goes back to the de Blasio years. Search and seizure. Terry versus Ohio, Supreme Court of the United States says if you have reasonable grounds, you can confront somebody and search them. Reasonable suspicion. So you have a judge in the Southern District of New York, Shira Scheinlin, and what does she do? In a case that was brought against the police department and the city, she goes in and she gives an overweight to the so-called evidence against PD. Ray Kelly was a commissioner. She was taken off the case because this United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit found her to be biased against NYPD. And there had been a conviction against NYPD in the city of New York, a finding against them. And funny thing happened. De Blasio comes in. It was perfectly clear that on an appeal, NYPD would have been vindicated. The case would have been overturned. De Blasio withdrew the appeal. And so what they did is they hamstrung the cops in the ability to do search and seizure. Now, why is that important? Because gun violence is a very big deal. And if you can't do reasonable searches and seizure, the guys won't leave their guns upstairs. They'll bring them into the streets with them. And that's a very, very big deal if you talk about law enforcement. See, the theory, I, as a former assistant attorney general, who did some prosecutions and investigations, or as a judge, I understood that broken windows theory was a key to everything. Broken windows theory, as you gentlemen know far better than I, means you nip the small stuff in the bud and you stop the creation of an environment of lawlessness. You restore civil order, quality of life, keep the bad guys in check. You work with reasonable searches and seizure. You make the arrests you have to make. You do what you have to do. Hopefully you go to prosecutors who will enforce the law and do what they have to do. Make sure that you appoint or you elect judges who actually care about public safety and law and order. It all works together. So if you want to create a formula for the disintegration of society and a culture of lawlessness and violence, then that's what they've done. So if you step back and you look at it objectively, you can see step by step by step by step, they're weakening the structures of civilization and public safety.
Judge, what's your thoughts on Governor Hochul coming out and endorsing Mandami?
Very, very, very funny, because at this lunch I ran into the brother of Congressman Swazi. And Congressman Swazi from Long Island had the good sense and the moral fortitude to say, is she kidding? What does she mean it? The endorsement by Hochul of Mandami means she's locked herself into all the positions he's taken. She can't say, well, I had a nice conversation with him and da-da-da. That's nonsense. You support him, you're supporting his platform. What is his platform? Anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-law and order, anti-public safety, anti-capitalism. Kathy Hochul, you have endorsed all of that. Don't tell me you had a conversation with him.
Right.
He'll listen to you, yes you to death, and he's going to do what he wants to do. The one fundamental truth about human beings is if they tell you they're going to do something, likelihood is they're going to do it.
Like Adolf Hitler at Mein Kampf.
That's right. Or the Hamas. When they tell you they want to kill you, you better believe them. They want to kill you, and they'll do it if they're given the opportunity. This guy is absolutely committed to anti-capitalist system, to the imposition of socialism, to decarcerization, to anti-Semitism, to Islamic jihad and Antifa. That's what he's committed to. And Hochul, by endorsing him, has done a shameful act. As a Democrat, I'm embarrassed and shamed by her doing that. I would think better of her, but she did it.
Yeah. Do you think Chuck Schumer will follow suit?
I believe, I said this on Katz and Cosby, was it last night or the night before? I said, as far as I'm concerned, she just gave the green light for Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries to do an amen.
Yeah.
They'll be like a Greek chorus embracing him because they're scared to death of the crazy left in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is not the Democratic Party I grew up in. It's not the party of Jack Kennedy and Scoop Jackson and Hewitt Humphrey and Bobby Kennedy. It's not the party of strong national defense, pro-law and order, capitalism, free trade. It's not that party at all. So it's a party that's being driven by the Bernie Sanders, the Elizabeth Warrens, very dangerous, dangerous people. This character, Chris Murphy out of Connecticut. These are dangerous people because they're undermining that which works.
Right.
The system that works. Are there imperfections in the American experiment? Of course there are imperfections, but it's worked better than anybody else could come up with. And socialism is not the answer. You put socialism in the city of New York, you will destroy the city of New York.
Right.
By Kathy Hochul endorsing this clown, she's wrapped herself in that.
Yeah. It's not the Jim McManus Democratic Club.
No, it's definitely not Jimmy McManus's Democratic
Absolutely
Club.
not.
You know, I wanted to ask you something. You brought up Islamists before. What do you think the chances of Sharia law becoming a thing in New York? Because there's like, supposedly I heard there was like 1 million Muslims now in the city.
Well,
is it possible that Sharia law can...
There's two answers to that, Ed. It's a very interesting question. Bernard Lewis he's a British historian, political thinker. And Bernard Lewis said that this is a war of civilizations. Now, the Judeo-Christian experience in Europe, United States, some parts of Asia, Africa, even in the Middle East, that viewpoint was live and let live. They had a moral code, but live and let live. The Judeo-Christian ethic didn't have to go into going into territories and making people convert to a religion at the point of a sword. Okay? So you're dealing with something that was created in Egypt in the 1920s. It was called the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood is dedicated to subversion of Western civilization, Western countries, imposition of Sharia law, their way of the highway. And they want buck under will be exterminated. That's what they believe in. This is not all Muslims. This is this particular crowd. And there's a fight within the Muslim community between the so-called common sense Muslims and these crazy radicals. So what's the likelihood of that happening? the more power they have politically, the more they will push their agenda to go forward. That's what's happening in Europe. That's why you have gutless foreign nations. England, for example, their politics is being controlled by the Islamists. Now, Sharia law works its way outside the city of London, works its way outside in different sections of France, outside of Paris, where the federal authorities and local authorities are afraid to go in. Will that happen in the United States? Shouldn't happen in the United States, because there's only one body of law here. It's not based on a religious or a political cult. It's based on our Constitution. So the likelihood of success has to do with the demographic game, has to do with the power game, who's controlling what. So hopefully you push back, you stop these people from their momentum, and you let common sense people who understand what the issues are at stake. There's no guarantee that they won't try to do it, but I have every hope that fair-minded judges and legislatures and mayors and governors will push back and stop it. It's not an easy answer to that question, Ed. If you understand their mindset and what they're trying to accomplish, you'll know it's a fight that has to be fought every day. Like safety on the streets. You don't declare a victory, say, oh, we have safe streets, let's move on. Every day you have to enforce the laws and give effect to a high quality of life and public safety. Otherwise, people will flee.
This is creeping. And I believe it's Dearborn recently changed their patches for the police department, which now has Arabic writing on the patch. I'm like, wow. I said, that's...
Where?
I believe
Dearborn, Michigan. It's a
Dearborn,
citadel.
Michigan.
Okay.
A citadel of the Muslim community in Michigan.
And a couple of months back, Adams signed there have been issues with different mosques around the city, wanted to do the calls to prayer 5 times a day. And a lot of pushback from the neighborhoods. People are like, no, I don't want to hear the calls for prayer. He wound up agreeing to it. They can now do call to prayer 5 times a day. That's a form of psychological warfare for people that live there. It's slowly and incrementally trying to work its way in. You talk about the Muslim Brotherhood. A lot of people don't realize Hitler was a big fan of the Muslim Brotherhood and actually traveled to the Middle East and met with the Grand Mufti.
That's right. They could have, by the way, the Grand Mufti
Of Jerusalem.
Yeah, Grand Mufti was dedicated to the same proposition Hitler was, to exterminate the Jewish people.
Yeah.
And he cut a deal, and he supported the Germans in the war.
Late 20s, early 30s, he started incorporating a lot of their ideology into what he was doing.
Yeah, by the way, going back, as Pete just pointed out, the Muslim Brotherhood, its charter in the 1920s, stood for the fundamental proposition of infiltration into Western society, insinuating it in, and weakening it from the inside. This is a calculated plan. And the difference is, I think they're now getting momentum because they've had success in Europe because the idiocy of Merkel, who's the prime minister or chancellor of Germany, who, because of open borders, allowed all these people to come in from the Middle East. These people coming in from the Middle East were not vetted. You know who they were. They don't have the same tolerance for diversity. And the result of that, Europe is under siege, and they could go under. So America is probably the last great bastion of Western civilization, unless the people, like you have the prime minister of Italy now, seems to be getting it. So she may be helpful. But the point is, you have a weak leadership in France, you have a weak leadership in England. They're rolling.
It's also being explored, and I firmly believe them. There are a lot of nations in the Middle East that will absolutely have banned the Muslim Brotherhood. They don't want them there because they're so problematic. And I think probably what we might see sometime in the near future, they'll be designated a terrorist organization by the United States. Stuff like that, when these designations will crimp some of this activity that's going on, especially with a lot of the funny money that's getting passed around between different organizations.
But by the way, you just raised a very good point, talking about funny money being passed around. NGOs, non-government organizations. Who's funding them? What are they doing with this money? For what purposes? So I don't want to give a primer to Mandami, but I'm sure he has a few smart people around him. Use non-government organization money to infiltrate, to buy people off, to control the agenda, to build up your staff. So you take these non-government organizations, they get money, including taxpayers' money, and what they do is they put it in their own staff. So they create an infrastructure to subvert our country. And the foundations do the same thing too. So the game plan is very shrewd, it's very clever, it's long in existence, it's picked up momentum, it's more dangerous than ever. That's why I said earlier in the show, Antifa was bad, Black Lives Matter was bad, but this is worse.
Especially with Mandani, he'll support them.
Exactly right.
Give them
exactly
leeway.
right.
You have 1 million Muslims in the city, many of them good people, probably a good number are
I'm sure you have good people in Gaza, but the point is they were as much hostages, the good people of Gaza, hostages to Hamas as much as those Jews the couple hundred Jews that they grabbed. And it wasn't just Jews. People from all over the world were grabbed by these Hamas savages. This is the troubling thing about America. We don't have the attention span to pay attention. We're into immediate gratification. So how long is it going to be before we forget about the poor girl who was savagely killed on the North Carolina train? How quickly are we going to forget that people stood around and did nothing to intercede? How long are we going to be before we forget that the woman sitting next to her didn't even try to give her medical attention, to try to stop the bleeding? Literally wouldn't stop the bleeding. How long is it going to be before we forget that the guy walked out cavalierly off the train and nobody tried to stop him? I mean, think about that. Yeah. Think about how awful it is. The woman is stabbed, nobody goes to protect her. The woman is critically injured, maybe had been dying, maybe he couldn't have saved her, but nobody went there to try to compress the artery to stop it from happening. Nobody tried to stop the guy from leaving the train. I mean, what's wrong with us?
Well, 24 years later of 9/11, now they want to elect Mandami to be the mayor. Go figure. Talking about people forgetting.
It just came up a few minutes ago. On 9/11 this year, apart from some pithy comments from some of these politicians, Brad Lander, who's the New York City controller, and in my opinion, probably just a horrible person, did a Zoom call that night with Mahmoud Khalil. And Khalil's a guy that you should listen to because he's telling us what he would like to do. He will flatten Israel. He wants to bring down the West. This is the city controller.
And he's Jewish.
Well, that was the topic of the conversation was the future of Jewry.
But Pete, you just raised a good question. Why is it that some of my co-religionists are so stupid that they can't see the handwriting on the wall? Why is it that a group of people like to think of themselves as pretty smart are dumb as hell? They don't understand history. As I said earlier, when people tell you they want to kill you and it's part of their religious and ideological and cultural agenda, you better believe it. Lenin had an expression for people like Lander. They're useful idiots. At the first opportunity, they'll take out Lander. But Lander is such a grasping, opportunist, amoral individual, he'll be happy to be the front for Mandami. Why? Because they promised him a gig at City Hall. That's why.
He pals around with Linda Sarsour. And Linda Sarsour is descendant of people that were actively involved in the Muslim Brotherhood. She's a heavy operator now with a lot of these organizations. But you know what? And the group J-Fredge.
Right.
They're all basically, they say as a Jew. They're all Marxist. They're anything but. But you get a guy, city controller, steps up. Well, oh yes, as a Jew, and isn't that? If you have half a brain in your head, you would realize that land is a snake.
You know, there was a comment I think it was yesterday morning on this radio station by one of the politicians who said that there were Jews in Germany who supported Hitler.
That's correct.
And
where did that get him?
They wound up being
where did that get him?
Got them the ovens.
Right.
Crazy. Judge, the Democratic Party. There's still, I would like to believe, some common sense people in the Democratic Party, correct?
Well, there's David Patterson and me.
Okay.
And Swazi.
So is there enough, is there enough that outweigh the far left in the Democratic Party? Or do you think the far left is just out of control?
Let me tell you how they control it. How the socialists, the Democratic Socialists of America and the Working Families Party, let me tell you how they control the Democratic Party. They're very well funded by the Soros types, okay? That's number one. Number two, they're very, very well organized and disciplined, and they're doing this every day. They do politics every day, okay? And there's this system called a primary system. So the so-called establishment politicians are scared to death that it'll be primaried, and they'll lose in a primary against a left-winger. So therefore, they're intimidated to be silent and to look the other way or to mouth support. And that's the secret of the success of the far left. The big mistake was when they allowed Bernie Sanders, who's never been a Democrat, to run in Democratic primaries, conventions, and caucuses against Hillary Clinton. Why? Because Hillary didn't want to look like she was exclusionary. Guess what? If you're not a Democrat, you shouldn't be in the Democratic Party. Mandami should not be in the Democratic Party. Swazi, Congressman Swazi said that. He's a socialist. You want to run for office? God bless you. Run for office, but run as a socialist. Don't run as a Democrat, because you're not a Democrat.
Right.
And they shouldn't be in the party. Period. But if in the party and they're allowed to run in these primaries, they have all this money, all this organization behind them, and you have the establishment politicians who are afraid to be challenged. What they don't understand is that they're doomed anyway, because the nature of these movements is to use these people as useful idiots and then to take them out and get rid of them at the first opportunity. This is the beginning. This is not a one-off. Let's be very clear. This is not a one-off. For New York, this is not the city, the state. This is not a one-off at all for the country. This is going to be replicated throughout the country in 2026. All across, they're already recruiting candidates to run in Democratic primaries against the so-called establishment Democrats. So the future of the Democratic Party is at risk.
Yeah.
Now, there's some foolish Republicans who believe that having Mandami elected as mayor is a good thing, because then you have something to run against the Democrats on. Don't assume, as we say in my business, don't assume facts, not evidence. If they wreck the city of New York, if they destroy the city of New York, that's a terrible price to pay for a campaign theme, which may or may not win in 2026.
I brought this up before. We've all been in that bad movie before.
Actually,
back in the 90s.
Absolutely right.
Don't want to see the sequel. The damage they could do in 4 years. And I'm 65 years old. I don't want to leave New York. I like it here. My family's here.
Right.
And it's going to descend into chaos.
Yep, I agree.
I would just give you a final thought on that, Pete. So at the time, I was the general counsel, city council, chief counsel, Peter Valone, the speaker. And there was a kid who was stabbed to death in the subway station in Times Square. Kid from Utah coming in for the U.S. Open.
Brian
worked on that case.
Yep.
Brian something.
Brian Watkins.
Right. That's exactly right. And what did he do? He's a victim of a wolf pack, of a mugging, because he was protecting his family, his sister and his parents. So I came into City Hall that morning after, and I threw my trench coat on the speaker's couch, and I said to him, Peter, we're going to lose the city. We've got to do something. I said, what do you want to do? I said, we have to have more cops. He said, well, you're my lawyer. Do I have the authority to make more cops? I said, let me give you the answer to that. Legally, you can't increase the number of cops, and you can't mandate more cops, because under the city charter, that becomes the province of the mayor and the police commissioner. Okay? So you can do it by a referendum, but you can't do it by a mere local law. I said, but politically, you can get the high sign on this by having a campaign for more cops, and Dinkins, then the mayor, will fold. So that was the beginning of something called Safe Street, Safe City.
Yep.
And so Safe Street, Safe City was negotiated by Vallone senior staff and Dinkins senior staff. The good news is we had a deputy mayor with real brains and real experience, Judge Milton Mullen, who's a deputy mayor for public safety. And Milt understood this stuff. And I understood a little bit about it too. So Milton and I negotiated and got what had to be done. So the finance director of city council says, well, how are we going to pay for this? I said, I just told you how you're going to save the city by getting a whole bunch of new cops. So we'll find a funding mechanism. We'll go up to Albany and get authority to increase the surcharge on the income tax, because the only tax the local government can do is real property tax. Everything else you need the state legislature for. So we got the governor online, we got the state legislature online, we got the city council, which we controlled online, we had the mayor online, and we got it done. Mullen said to me, I just can't have cops. I need more. I said, okay, Judge, what do you need? He said, well, I need social workers, drug counselors, legal aid lawyers, more prosecutors, more translators. I said, fine. You tell me, give me a list of what you need. We'll do it. We'll work together as a joint venture. We'll get the cops in. And that was the genesis of Safe Streets, Safe City. And I commend to you, all of you, and our listeners, our viewers, a movie, a documentary called Gotham, The Fall and Rise of New York, which tells you that story.
Well, thank you, Your Honor, for what you've done. You did a great job.
Listen, I love this city. And like Pete here, I love this city. I've dedicated my life to saving and protecting it and serving it. I don't want to leave. I want my children and my grandchildren to live here. I want this to be the greatest city in the world, as it's always been, through all its troubles. But don't assume that just because you're a wishful thinker, everything's going to be fine. Not everything's going to be fine unless we fight back and do the right thing.
Very true. This has been a great interview and a great session. And, Cap?
And you have a program to prepare for the 5 o'clock show.
That's right. I'm moving on to my next program.
Cats and
Cosby, 5 to 6 every night, Monday through Friday, WABC. Correct.
Great show. We listen all the time. I know probably all of our audience listens as well. Pete, Sergeant Pete Panucci, I'd like to thank you again for coming around, and
Thank you.
I appreciate
Thank you for
it.
having me.
And I know the captain promised you dinner, so I think that's great. Actually, he promised you dinner tonight, too, I think.
He's promised the world dinner.
I'm still waiting. But Judge Richard Weinberg, thank you so much again for being here. And
as I said at the beginning, it's an honor and privilege to be with you. It's an honor and privilege to have you as my friends, longstanding. And it's an honor and privilege to meet Sergeant here, who's going to be a new friend.
Oh, absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. Around good people here. This is great. I'd like to thank everyone for listening to another episode of Cop Talk. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe to Cop Talk. You could also follow us at Cop Talk WABC. We're also on social media. And Captain?
And you can view the Honorable Judge on YouTube and other such
That's right, the
programs.
podcast, the Left the Record Show.
At the record show.
Sunday morning, 6 to 7. If you miss it on Sunday mornings, you can always listen to the podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you. So until next time, God bless you, God bless America, God bless our military, and God bless law enforcement throughout the world. Thank you and be safe.
This is Cop Talk.